Now, when you get in here and you've modified the carburetor or even cleaned it, and you want to get back in here and tune it, you've got a couple of different screws that you've got to be able to reach. Now, the idle screw is clear back in here. A little hard to get to because the rear cylinder is right there, and on the other side, I believe the front cylinder is in the way. So you've got to find a way around that. And then you've got the sync key, which is clear underneath there. And it's not really, you're not really able to see it on here, but it's at the very bottom of the carburetor. And you've got to be able to turn that too. And that's a little hard to get to with a screwdriver. So as you're doing that, you're adjusting the fuel mixture at the idle and going back and forth, and it gets to be sort of a pain. So there's one thing you can do, and there's a couple things you can do. One is you can get a Motion Pro carburetor adjustment tool. These are a little expensive, so but it works pretty well. You know, it gets around that corner that you need to get in there, and it also gets in on the bottom really well. So you have that option. Another option that you might have for tuning this without any tools or very little tools is this thumb screw. Now, when I rebuilt the carburetor, I looked all over for it online and couldn't find it anywhere. Nobody seemed to have it for the Vulcan 750. And so kind of just got tired of looking, so I forgot about it. And then all of a sudden I just typed in, you know, Vulcan 750 carb kit or something along those lines, and this popped up practically the first search. And they were a little expensive, in my opinion, $15 a piece, and you have to have two in order for it to be viable on this carburetor. So thing is, you know, and these idle screws, of course, are very brittle. They come with a covering on the over the tip so that you don't damage this tip, and you have to be very careful with that tip so that you don't damage it. But once you get it in there, you're golden, because then you can just use your fingers to adjust the idle mixture. Here's the problem though. A lot of these aftermarket parts don't really, you know, a lot of times the person selling doesn't really give you a good enough description of what you have to do to make it fit, or if it fits perfectly, or if it goes on other models, or what. It just said, you know, Vulcan 750, so I assumed it would fit perfect. That's not the case this time. You put it in there, and you have to be very careful to do this while the carburetor is installed. And it threads. You know, it threads perfectly, okay? That's not the problem. Here's where the problem starts, okay? That vacuum port is way too close for comfort, okay? For anything. It can't move around that. Some metal is going to have to come off of this idle screw in order for it to work. You know, you spend $15 on it and it doesn't fit correctly. You have to get a little creative on how you're going to solve that issue. So here's the problem though, okay? It's obviously knurled around the outer part of the thumb, where your finger goes to adjust the mixture, and that provides a little bit of grip for your fingers. I don't really feel like you absolutely need that kind of grip in order to turn it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a grinder, and I'm going to grind it down to where it'll fit, and it's going to take quite a bit of metal off, but it will also get rid of that knurling. And unless I'm mistaken, typically how they knurl it is they knurl it before they even machine it. So it would be a little difficult to redo the knurling on it after you shaved it down. So that's something to consider before you start grinding away on it, but it is useless if you don't grind it down. So instead of being out $30 for these things, I'm going to grind it down and see how that works. I'll even show you guys what I do and hopefully save you guys some money in the process. But this is going to be a tricky operation and something that you really want to do very delicately. Now this comes with a spring and washer and O-ring, and that's already inside the carburetor on the old one. So as long as you don't go pulling things out, you should be able to just slide it right back in place and without any concerns. But the prime word is just to be careful. Be careful when you're doing that, and make sure that you're not cross-threading or putting too much pressure on this while you're doing that. It also comes with a sleeve that protects this little guy right here, and so I'm using that here on the vise, and just to protect it while I crank it down on this. I didn't put a whole lot of pressure, just enough to hold it in place so that it doesn't move while I'm grinding on it. All right, the preferred tool would be a Dremel, but all I have is a grinder. So I'm a big fan of using what you got instead of going out and buying a bunch of tools to do one thing. It's like, it's got to end at some point. So I'm gonna try it with this and see how far I get, and let you guys watch on that. Always wear eye protection when you're grinding on metal. Metal flakes will fly off and get in your eye, so be careful about it. And what I did was I made some ridges on it, which make it a little bit easier to turn it, and to also kind of determine a little bit where the setting is, because on the factory thumb screws it didn't have a marking on it to where you could see how many turns that you were turning it in and out. So hopefully I can mark one of these ridges and sort of tell a little bit better exactly how many turns I am. You got to leave enough room for the rubber stopper that goes on that vacuum line, or if you have reed valves, just a rubber hose will go around that, and you have to leave enough room for that. So you do have to grind it down quite a bit. And then what I did was I etched, sort of a marking in the very top of it, and just so that you could tell how many turns out you are. And the screw got a little banged up, during the course of all this grinding, but all in all, it works. So take it or leave it, but I think it works just fine like this, and I can get the idle adjusted without too much work. As far as modding this bike out, there's a lot of different things that you can do. Maybe not as many or as easy as other bikes are, but it just takes patience, and if it doesn't make sense, then don't do it. But I've been able to make all of these modifications myself without too much difficulty, and I hope that this video helps you guys determine whether it's a mod that's right for your bike or not.